taking on a one-way ride. Ask me nothing, leave me be. Taking everything in my stride. Don't need reason, don't need rhyme. There ain't nothing I'd rather do. Going down, party time. My friends are gonna be there too. I'm on a highway to hell. 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 Stop sign, speed limit. Nobody's gonna pass me around. How is it still this? What the fuck? Unhost, I said. I fucking said unhost the goddamn thing. How about you unhost the goddamn thing when I tell you to unhost the fucking thing? Now, I feel like a dang computer hacker. Learning how to unhost things. I'm unhosting things. I did it. I'm the unhost with the unmost. Excuse me. Just getting a little glorped up here. So today, I thought I'd do something as a little experiment. So I'm going to be recording for tomorrow an inebriated past. Haven't done one of those in a while. I think the last one was Upton Sinclair and the Epic Campaign of 1934. And I kind of don't really know what I want to do it on yet, and I figured it might be interesting to have a brainstorming session with some of you people and see if you could give me an idea, because the problem I always have with inebriated past is I never know what to pick, and I kind of have to get sort of shot from a side angle to like be like, hey, something has to aha me. And I thought it'd be interesting if we could do a little experiment here and see if I could get something that I feel like, yes, if I prepared for that, I could by tomorrow do an episode. The Battle of Blair Mountain, that's an interesting one. Certainly a rip-roaring story, that's for sure. I've thought about doing the Battle of Blair Mountain before. Bleeding Kansas would be interesting. Oh man, something says the Spanish Civil War to troll all left tendencies. I was actually thinking of doing that, but then I decided to throw it out there a little bit. I don't know, because I kind of want to do the Spanish Civil War, but at the same time it feels a little too big. And it would be fun, though, to troll all the tendencies, because I do think you could tell that story in a way to piss off all of the side's historical advocates. Because you can tell that story in a way that makes the communists look like stooges, handmaidens of capital, and a new, like the Trotskyist nightmare of them as like a bureaucratic state working in concert with capital to destroy revolution. You can also tell that story as about the anarchists as a bunch of undisciplined fucking peasant dipshits who would and not have been able to organize their way out of a paper bag. But of course, the real tragedy is that both of those things were true, but also the best stories about both sides were true. The people who were in there making up those sides, they were, for the most part, fighting under reasonable assumptions. It's just that Spanish society was so fractured at that point that there was no way for those fissures to be healed in the breach, in the crisis moment. Paris Commune, that's interesting. William Jennings Bryan. I mean, people apparently. So people listen to the Thomas Frank episode. That might be interesting to go into more detail. The thing about Bryan is that he is not like he is what we got instead of a socialist leader. You know, like we didn't get a real socialist. Like our version of him would have been like a Debs, but Bryan was the figure who came out of the like the rural side of American populism, which was undermined by its parochialism, and that's the problem with American populism. Is that it was parochial because we didn't have an articulated working class. We didn't have one of those made. We had this group of people spread across the country in different conditions of life, divided by geography, race, ethnicity, language, religion, that didn't cohere the way that working classes did in European countries. And the fact that you had this, at that time, massive number of small-holding farmers. I mean, you had, before the turn of the century, something like 90% of American involved in some sort of agriculture. That was just it ensured that when we got a popular common party, it did not have the internal coherence of a labor party like you saw in Europe. And the fact we already had these parties that were set up. We had the Democratic and Republican parties already extant because America democratized formally much earlier than Europe because there was the land to give away. There was the venting steam valve of Western expansion. It meant that you could have, by the 1830s, at a time when Europe was completely gripped in the fist of reaction, even the franchise in England is not very terribly extended. During that period in America, the most states had like a real popular suffrage, and that was because of the existence of property as a arbitrator of social conflict. The European polities, the European monarchies couldn't be given money. They couldn't give land away. There was no land to give away. The land was all spoken for by the fucking elite who validated their rule. So, formal democracy had to be restrained. Enclosure would be interesting. The Marathon of Hope. You fucking Canadians, no thank you. Oh shit. Maybe I should just do Benjamin Butler, like a whole like a whole episode about him, the way I did about Willich. But maybe that's going back to the Civil War uh, well too many times. There's too many Canadians in here. We got people talking about Tommy Douglas and Louis Riel. Get out of here. I haven't read Butler's book yet. I think I kind of want to wait until I've read his whole autobiography. Uh, um, so I might wait and do that one relatively recently. But I think I want to do a different one today or for tomorrow. The German Revolution. That's an interesting one. That's another real. I don't know. I kind of think about maybe doing something that's like sort of broadly about that whole interwar period where the Russians try to do their revolution with the premise in mind that it would lead to a continent-wide revolution. That's why they did it. No one thought that Russia could sustain itself in a socialist economy absent the intervention of Western capital in the form of uh, um, help from these new uh, European communist states that were going to emerge. And then you saw this failure to ignite across Europe. And it's not just Germany. There's a Soviet that briefly takes power in Hungary. There's a battle between Freikorps and Bolsheviks across in the Baltic. There's a bloody civil war in Finland, which sees the pro-Bolshevik side interned and massacred. And then there's uh, strikes and uprisings in France and England. And then after that initial, and then of course the Russians tried to invade Poland. And then once that initial wave subsides, you see the birth of fascism as like a political challenge to this new force on the continent. And then you see in countries that are like at the periphery, like Spain, where industrialization has been the least implemented, which is one of the big reasons that anarchism was such a defined tendency in the Spanish Civil War, is because you were dealing with very close to medieval conditions of peasantry in the countrysides of places like Catalonia, and they were not interested in the sort of social rationalization process of being turned into proletarians that the more coherent working class of like Madrid and like the railroad workers and stuff were moving towards. But then you see this war as part of this battle for power between these regimes, and it really is. It's a series of defeats. It's a series of defeats at every point. Even World War II is essentially a defeat because the conditions that Stalin accepts at the end of that war are the conditions of the eventual defeat of the Soviet Union. And I think that maybe people didn't know that at the time, but I think that Stalin, even if he'd known that, would have taken the deal. Because the alternative would have been a conflict with the capitalist world that he didn't have the wherewithal or ability or will to carry out. Because then you have the Cold War, which is really a resource war over access to the colonial underbellies of the Western powers, which are now having to be turned over to native political formations and native political economies. And what network, what global system would they be connected into? And the system that the Soviets signed off on with Bretton Woods and the UN and everything, it essentially assumed it guaranteed that over time the capitalist West would strangle the communist world, which is exactly what happened. The only thing that could have changed that dynamic was the challenge, the battle for resources, which was definitively won by the West. And that's why we're living in a world where capital won, where we are having to grapple with that. And if capital won, and common ruin is the likely outcome, then what do we try to do with our lives? How do we live with that reality without the fantasy of a deliverance? And of course, that is not to say that we're doomed, the human race or us as individuals. It means that we are going to have to focus, I think, on building durable structures to resist the decline that's coming. I feel like this is a period of decadence and inherent decline that can't be resolved from within. Capital won because no one in the socialist camp believed in the system by the 70s. That's correct. And the reason for that is because the project that they built was not, it required a advanced revolution that never happened. The project, the bootstrap idea, okay, it failed. Europe did not kick off. Now what do we do? The answer of, well, we're going to compete with Europe and we're going to do capitalist, like capital accumulation the way that capitalism does it in this underdeveloped fucking feudal backwater. It was viable in that it created a state and it created a state capacity, but the state it created was unable to successfully prosecute the global war against capitalism that was its raison d'etre. It couldn't do it. It could not fight it effectively. And the fact of that, the proof of that is its failure. And it wasn't anybody's fault. I think the Bolsheviks were correct in their understanding of the situation in 1917, that there had to be a war, or that there had to be a seizure of power, or else there would be the reactionary counter-revolution. They were correct about that. And they were the only force capable at that moment of carrying off the seizure of power. Uh, but that was because they thought doing that would spark a global revolution. That's the notion that Trotsky promulgated that allowed them to revise Marxism the way that they did, which is always funny when you hear people talk about revisionism with acid in their mouth. Bolshevism was revisionism because they were in Russia, and who wants to be told you got to sit on your thumbs? And they were right that there was not enough middle class to stand up to take power in 1917. But then the question is, well, then why is a revolution worth pursuing in that condition? If it means that it will create a situation of general war. And they had good reason to believe that was going to happen. But then it didn't. I've not listened to the WTF with Hunter Biden. That sounds fun though. He smoked Parmesan cheese. I didn't know Parmesan looked like. I've never done crack, so I don't know what crack looks like. I've only seen it in New Jack City. I shan't go on crack. No, thank you. Apparently, it's popping off in Belfast again. Real 70s hours. We'll see what happens. The Taiping Rebellion might be interesting. The Taiping Rebellion might be interesting because it is very under. It's something that's very under known about, considering how massive it was. It was they estimate something like 30 million people died. It was in the middle of but it happened the same time the U.S. Civil War was happening. So we all forget about it. It was happening during one of the Opium Wars, which also is just not remembered at all. It is amazing that it's about a guy. The whole thing was a guy who failed his SATs and went nutso. A failed PMC, basically, who led a peasant revolt that organized itself around all of the discontent among the landless Hakka peasantry, who made up the sort of rural proletariat or proto-proletariat of China, and then ended up being the bulk of the army that made up the Communist Party when they took power. Favorite Pokemon is Geodude because of that tweet about Geodude being real and being his strong and being Obama's friend, which I always thought was funny. Geodude's rock indeed. We kind of did Watergate on the HW episode. I don't really think I have that much to add to it. It is a fascinating story, though, partially because of how quaint it all is. Is Q dead? That's an interesting question. It's interesting. I think that we can say, at least I think it seems pretty clear that it looks like it's splintering. It looks like Q is, as you'd imagine, it's going into factions. I don't think people are going back to normal because that's not an option anymore. But I think people are going to be finding their own sects, their own discrete reality versions, because we are getting to the point where our escape valve into cyberspace is losing its power on us, as we have to keep cranking up our own emotional reaction and relation to it. We have to deepen the story that we're telling ourselves when we go online, and that means we're going to have to start finding deeper and deeper parallel realities to create. So like real mind palace shit. Because obviously reality is always made up. Reality is constructed by the shared delusion of the citizenry, like the delusions that we all perpetuate by virtue of their hegemony in our lives, and we operate from those principles without even thinking about it. But that one big delusion we've been telling ourselves is breaking down, and what's filling the space is these tailor-made, bespoke delusions that can be shared with much smaller groups of people than the larger hegemonic truths or delusional truths we used to operate by. So that means that people say, what's happening with cults? Why aren't cults coming back? I mean, we're all kind of living in cults. It's just they're soft, virtual cults. I mean, cults involve people living together. Cults involve sociality. They involve people buying homes and living in them together. That's the opposite of the lifestyle of the atomized, mediated digital American. So now all the cults are relationships of virtual reality that we sustain through engagement with the internet. So yeah, media fandom has replaced cults. Are we a cult? I mean, I would say that we are in that middle area between a cult and what in the past would have been one's relationship to the media one consumes. Like people consume media now in a way that is more emotionally textured, and they share a imaginative communion with others who like similar media in a way that is between cults and the old way that people used to consume media. I will say that. But it's just that the word is less operative because everything is less social. Everything is less social. We have just less sociality in our existences, and we're filling that hole with virtual uh, existence and virtual politics, virtual identity. And then we just spend our days doing the same stuff. Our actual actions are not comporting to the mind realm we're in. Like, people want to talk about how we've never been more divided and shit, and how there's this partisan conflict. It is, yes, but it's amazing, with that being true, how relatively uncoordinated and ritualized political violence in this country is. And that's because that's just the very end of a process. The vast majority of people are not that activated. And even the ones who are that activated are mostly activated to simulate political violence. The majority of us are happy to virtually engage in like a political sorting and ritualized, disavowal and upholding. But in our day-to-day lives, we just do the same stuff we ever would have done. We're just consuming. We're rats in a maze, man. And what I mean by that is we can have these deeply felt political involvements and fandoms, but they do not move beyond that retail consumer level. And so terms like, fascism and cults and all this shit, they still have a hold of our imaginations, and we still see people carrying out acts using the vocabulary and the symbolism, but all of that has been emptied of actual meaning, actual consequent meaning, like consequence to the way things are going to go. The way things are going to go is just continued techno-feudal declension. That's the only way they can go. There is no building up social conflict. There is only a continued abstraction away from people of their ability to reproduce themselves. Like, Americans have been disarmed in the sense that they cannot live except at the sufferance of a global supply chain that they have no power over. Somebody's asking if I ever went to a Milwaukee Admirals game. I went to one Milwaukee Admirals game in my life. I think it was with my Cub Scout troop. I was very excited to go because I lived like an hour north of there in a smaller town, and I was just absolutely fascinated by tall buildings. I went and just seeing the absolutely the towering skyscrapers of Milwaukee. I was completely transfixed. Apparently, a new particle has dropped. There's a new particle that is being acted on in ways that cannot be perceived. Been very intrigued by these ideas lately about the reality of quantum space. I don't want to get too into it because I don't know anything, but it does seem to me that there's a real open question about the degree to which consciousness is a manifested force or can manifest force in the world. Like the consciousness is an acting independent force on the world. Not, of course, in a dualistic sense, just in the sense that, I don't know, there's a lot of tiny little particles out there, Your brain's made out of them. Your brain is made out of tiny little particles. And every decision you make is this transmission across time. These signals going and going into points of subsonic space. I don't know. This is all weed talk. I don't know anything about this shit. All I know about that stuff is that I know enough about it to know that there is no reason to believe that that a mechanistic construction of the universe, even if it could be done, would actually explain anything. I didn't watch the QAnon documentary. I don't know if I will. It's a lot. 6 hours. I maybe would like to watch a compilation of the stuff about the Watkinses because apparently they're really they're a pair of real jokers, just fascinating American grotesques. I mean, part of it is that I don't really care who Q is. I don't think it matters. Because it's pretty clear that Q is a social phenomenon. And at that point, whatever created it is almost beside the point. It's like you're constantly in an improv game and people are shouting out prompts and something fucking lands. And Q is what landed, whether it was a 4chan pervert or a bunch of anonymous posters or it was the government, which I know a lot of people believe that it was a intelligence operation. It was a psyop. The way it spread seemed to me to be pretty organic, which is the important thing. And what makes it organically transmittable is how primed people are for it, of how much people want something to do for their brain. They want something to make sense of the world around them. And because our only options to exert any control of our lives involve going online, that's where the more inquisitive of us, the most restlessly minded of us, that's where we're going to look for it. And we're all going to see, we're only ever going to see our reflections. We're only ever going to see, because we are isolated, we're not doing a class project of realizing through action shared goals, shared humanity, shared interests. We are only operating through the individual filter of a consumer. And so when we go online to find out what's going on, we're only looking for a validation of what we already thought, which is what Q is. Q is the native American rejection of the world as it exists, that cannot be articulated through any kind of leftist lens, because America defeats that at every turn by the reality of life in this country, by the defeat of class awareness, of the way that America makes it impossible to live, or even to know you could live as a worker as opposed to as an individual. I'm working on a project right now that's dealing with the anti-masons of the 1820s and 30s. And that is a perfect exemplar of this phenomenon. You had in Western New York, the burned over district, where the Third Great Awakening is happening, and people are coming to terms with how to be a Christian in a fallen world of commerce, where even yeomanry is sort of being cut off as an option, or the upper dreams of yeomanry are being foreclosed by the reality of land speculation and finance. But where the democratic explanation that is popular in the South and amongst the working people in the cities, blaming it on banks is not an option, because Western New York, only their entire economic engine is based on the Erie Canal, which is the first internal improvement, the defining internal improvement that Federalists and then National Republicans and Whigs would try to pursue in the face of Democratic opposition for the entire antebellum period. So these people were not going to be Democrats. They weren't going to be able to explain what was wrong by blaming the banks, because they and internal improvements, because their livelihoods depended on those things. So whose fault is it? And the answer they got was the fucking Masons, a group within a group, a secret favor seeking group, and within power. And of course, you know, the inciting incident that led to it was an actual murder of a former Mason who was going to write a book about their secrets, and whose death led to a bunch of Masonic political figures and law enforcement types just going, it's not a big deal. Actually, you know what? He kind of had it coming. And absent any way of like articulating a class critique at that point, those Masons stood in for the reality, which is that this system is not for your benefit. This system doesn't exist for you. The deeper truth about this democracy that these people lived in, but which they were fully devoted to. It was the only way they could articulate their distaste. And that's been how historically we have expressed our depoliticized, or rather declassified, alienation with the fruits of American democracy, which we putatively signed up for. This is the country we built. This is the greatest country in the world. This is the country that has our institutions and was built our liberties, and we are invested in. And yet it is a country that I do not recognize. How do you explain it? The answer is that the people who appear to be on your side aren't. And of course, that's correct. That is correct. They are not on your side. They are on the side of Moloch. They are on the side of Mammon. They are on the side of the devil in the form of a algorithm of profit extraction that does not care about any human feeling. And these are a dark priesthood. But because we don't have an articulation of class, it gets buried at the level of symbol. Any other ideas for the ameliorated past? I'm still not sure which one I'm going to do. Battle of Blair Mountain might be fun. Or I might just do Benjamin Butler. I don't know. But I think it's interesting that anti-masonry has a through line in the figure of Millard Fillmore from anti-masonry, which begins as a fusion of a grassroots that is alienated from power and wants an explanation for why they don't have it, and a class of political entrepreneurs, hustlers who wanted a way to challenge Jacksonian democracy in a way that would be appealing to regular people, and used anti-masonry as a coverage for that. And then once anti-masonry did its job, it was discarded for the creation of the Whig Party. And then after the Whigs broke up, it became the base. Millard Fillmore, who started off as an anti-Mason, became a Whig. Then after the collapse of the Whigs, he ran for president as the know-nothing candidate, the nativist candidate, because once the Whigs broke up, once again there was a question: how to get people to oppose democracy in the North without becoming sectional, without challenging slavery. And the answer was Irish Catholics. And of course, the irony here is that the Know-Nothings are called that because they started as a secret society called the Order of the Star-Spangled Banner. That you had to pledge your secrecy to them. And you had secret handshakes and shit, just like the Masons. But there's another strain there because another figure who started off as a anti-Mason and then became a Whig was Thaddeus Stevens, who then moved to the Republicans, not to the Know-Nothings, who decided that he wanted to be a sectional figure and someone who confronted slavery at its heart. And then he became the face of like a radical redistributivist Republican Party. That stuff where Kamala Harris is like, we're going to be going to war for water. That's pretty funny. Just like, I guess, just letting everyone know. It's like, hey, y'all, just so everyone has a heads up, we're going to be going to war for water. I mean, why would you, if you're a politician, why would you say that? It's just wild. It's like, hey, war boys, get ready. I'm going to get shiny and chrome. She is she is a fascinating figure in a way. I mean, she's just such a blank. She's so yeah, her capacity to just like laugh at all the most inappropriate moments. Uh, it's very interesting. It's very weird. Like she's not a politician like Obama, you know, whose gift is keying into what people want to hear and to present a facade of humanity. And then you got Biden, whose whole deal is being like a bluff, hearty, fake Irish uncle. She just goes out in public with zero human affect. Yeah, like a more of a Mitt Romney figure, a figure who wears their inhumanity proudly. And I guess you could say that that makes sense that she's the figure who will take power after Biden is like as the masks fall from Capitol, and as our political figures lose the requirement to perform humanity in order to be able to claim power, because our our influence in the process becomes less and less. Uh, you get these people take power who are barely able to contain their contempt for the obligations, the rituals of behaving like a human being. Real lizard hours. I remember that time when they, after she became VP, or after she endorsed Biden, and they asked her, of course, the classic gotcha. What about all these horrible things you said about him at the debate, including that he's like racist and that he personally is responsible for her being like otherized while being bussed as a young student in California? And she just goes, "It's a debate," and just starts laughing. Now, I get that's the correct answer. It's a debate. This doesn't matter. But I don't know if I can think of anybody else who would have responded with that, who would have just been that dismissive of even the pretense that they had to act like there was a consistency there. And that's why nobody likes her. But that's also why there is the K Hive, because she speaks to people who are similarly sick of pretending to be humans. I've seen some people like Kamala in the real world. I've heard tell of real Kamala fans. I saw a sign on a very big, very expensive house that said, "Congratulations, Vice President elect Michelle Obama, or Michelle Obama, Kamala Harris." Didn't even say Biden Harris. It said, "Congratulations, Vice President elect Kamala Harris." And then after the inaugural, they got rid of the elect, and it just said, uh, "Congratulations, President, Vice President Kamala Harris." So there are people who love her, and I think that they are wealthier people. I think people who work in some sort of supervisory capacity and who have a real identification with being a girl boss and also straining to hold back their frustration with their underlings. It'd be very funny though if she never gets to be president because Biden serves 2 terms. He's in a fucking exoskeleton by the end of it. He's our God Emperor 40K Warhammer, not Trump. It's him in the fucking suit. He wears like a big mech suit, but it's shaped like a '57 Cadillac with like the fucking fins and shit. Come on, man. I do wonder about Joe though. I wonder how Joe's doing. He seems like he's they're letting him out of the kennel, which is kind of interesting because it doesn't seem like he's doing too well. But I honestly feel like I feel more than anything that they are confident that the media is so in the bag for them, so terrified by Trump, and so dedicated to like breaking America's addiction to Trump that they're willing to overlook anything. And they figure if nobody talks about it except the right, it'll turn into actually it's ableist racism to say that Trump's brain is melting or that Biden's brain's melting. Somebody asked, will there ever be another 2-term president? That's actually an interesting question. Uh, if there's sufficient, I mean, it really depends on. It depends on if we get any more real, uh, like recession, depression situations again, or if they just keep liquefying the economy until the whole thing falls apart, like dissolves into like constituent corporate entities. But yeah, if there's significant economic volatility in the near term, I could see it just being a revolving door. Just getting mad and then kicking out the guy and bringing in the next one. Oh man, I have to say, I have not been paying too much attention to England, of course, because it's a benighted hell realm, but it is positively, darkly satisfying to watch the Keir Starmer Labour Party eat shit, even in the face of Boris Johnson fucking like the clumpsing it all over the vaccine or all over the coronavirus response. And it shows that they're always wrong, doesn't it? I mean, what the entire refrain during Corbyn was a competent labor leader, by which they meant a guy who was going to forswear socialism, would be up 20 points. And now they got their guy. They got their face, their neo-Blairite little boy, the little fucking apple polisher who's never been anti-Semitic one time in his life, and is a good position on Brexit or wherever the fuck, and is willing to accept the reality of austerity and the reality of capitalism, and he's just eating shit. He's eating absolute shit. It's wow. And I'm sure that there are plenty of reasons these guys have pulled out of their ass that this doesn't totally repudiate their entire political project. But we all know the real reason, which is that they don't care that he's bound that much. It never mattered if he won. It just mattered that Corbyn didn't win. Like, they don't actually give a shit. They never cared. It didn't matter if they believed that that a more moderate Labour would have been more competitive. They just didn't want Bernie to win, or Corbyn to win, and they made it happen. And now they get to churn around and explain this while they continue to eat shit. It would be funny if the UK breaks up, though. That's the hope. Is that you don't have a United Kingdom in 10 years. It'd be funny if the UK breaks up, but Australia still refuses to get rid of the Queen. They just love having a Queen so much. The Queen of England and Australia. Look, we love it. We love having a Queen. She's bloody great. The bloody Queen. She's a pisser. I did get the vaccine. I got the Johnson and Johnson one shot. So we'll see if my brain explodes. We'll see if I start taking orders from the UN. Yeah, I'm gonna look like Bart Simpson after he drank the low calorie soda. Pleasant taste, some monsterism. I'm sure I got. I'm filled with ground up Bill Gates foreskin. I'm sure. I haven't really had any side effects. It kind of makes me wonder if I got a placebo. Feeling pretty normal. I think I have webbed feet, though. That's one thing that's happened. So that's pretty cool. No, I will not be showing you. The English Civil War is pretty interesting. It is really where like capitalism starts developing its own coherent like political manifestation. Like capitalism and Puritanism are really linked, crucially, because uh, they're both about dissolving royal authority over the spirit and over the economy. And you have, even though this is very early merchant capitalism and very little in the way of any kind of manufacturing, you already have the forces emerge that are going to end up competing for power as capitalism develops more coherently. And you have guys like Gerard Winstanley, who articulates Marx's theory of social conflict 200 years before him in a religious context. He writes a pamphlet where he says that the source of conflict, the source of warfare between men, the source of social strife is class. It is, and of course, they mean by that, at that point, lords and serfs and such. But it's the premise of of the Communist Manifesto right there. And I think you really could say that 1688, the Glorious Revolution, which sort of caps the whole period of conflict between Parliament, merchant capital, and Calvinist Protestantism on the one hand, and royal authority, landed gentry, Anglicanism, and more formal, like hierarchical Christianity on the other. It erupts in the Civil War. They cut the head of the king off. Cromwell tries to impose a parliamentary order. I mean, I think he really did. And it failed because the social formations to generate it didn't exist. They were insufficient yet. And so he ended up having to just assume all power to himself into a royal figure, the way that Hobbes had predicted would happen. And then it led to the bringing back of the Stuarts, but only on conditions of a liberalization of the economy and of religious oversight, and which is why, and a liberalization of political rights. It's really a 50-year contest that ends with a treaty. It's essentially like a Westphalia-style treaty for English political economy. We're going to keep a king, but he's going to be a Protestant, and the Parliament will have real authority, even if final authority will be rested in the king. I think I might be. I thinking now. I could do Benjamin Butler pretty well, and make the points I want to make. Do I think that John Wayne Gacy was part of a child sex trafficking ring in Chicago? Well, shit, I do now. God damn. I feel like he would have said something about it. I mean, he had nothing to lose. What's my opinion on Obama? I'll just say this. Uh, Barack Obama, more like Barf Sack O'Crumbo. The man, the man is simply an O'Crumbo to me. All right. Hope to do. I don't know. I don't think I'll be able to do one on Friday. But next Wednesday, maybe. We'll see. But I will let people know when. And also, I'm still thinking about what the next book should be. I think I want to take a break from Reconstruction. So maybe something else. But if anyone has any good ideas, let me know. And then I'll maybe open it up here and find some more suggestions too. But yeah, maybe next week I'll say when precise what next book's going to be. Okay. Bye bye. Mwah.